Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new edition of the Media Row podcast. I'm your host, Justin Miller. As always, these shows are brought to you by Stevens Automotive and Sales and Kelly's Little Nipper. Kelly's Little Nipper over there at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. If you have not been there yet, you need to get over there. You're going to find great food, great drinks, and even better community. Always, when you go there, make sure to use that keyword you've heard on the show 1,000 times, Woodley. Use the keyword Woodley, and your first drink is on the house. Kelly's Little Nipper, proud sponsor of the Media Row podcast, 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. When you go there, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. So here we go. It's another Friday. I love these shows so much. These football season so far this year, and our first full football season of the Media Row podcast, has started off incredible. One, kudos to you guys. I appreciate all the comments, the subscriptions, the likes, ratings. The numbers have been great. And I'm not someone who is going to get, just glued to always checking the numbers, but I do like to check them out once in a while just to see, what you guys are liking, what I can improve on. And the numbers have been incredible. So I truly, from the bottom of my heart, really appreciate that. And if you have not yet, make sure to go to the social media pages, Twitter, follow at Media Row Pod. On TikTok, make sure to follow us there as well at Justin Miller on air. And then just wherever you get your podcasts, you can find the Media Row podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe as well there. And just continue to help us grow this thing. I truly appreciate it. But these Friday shows are a blast. I love Mondays. You get that reaction show. You get to recap what you saw over the weekend. Wednesdays, I still can't believe Coach Woodley allows me to annoy him each and every week. But I love those conversations. Learn so much about the team. Learn so much about Coach Woodley as well. And then Fridays are just fun. I love prediction radio. I love previewing. I was that kid that would get at the store, or I guess I would have my dad pay for it. I'm not paying for it. But I'd get those overpriced, college football magazines and college basketball magazines and just read those constantly. I loved previewing seasons, previewing games. I love every second of it, and that's what we get to do every Friday. And thank you for joining us. We're going to have a lot of fun today. I have a lot of notes. Every Friday I have double-sided notes of just what to get to. And so today, of course, we get to break down Drake taking on a top 15 team on the road against South Dakota. They're heading to South Dakota once again following a tough loss to number 2 South Dakota State last weekend. We'll get into kind of what we like from the team, some health updates for the team. We'll get into the concerns and then finish with the keys as well. And then we'll move on to the NFL, our pick'ems. One of my favorite things to do is the NFL and college football pick'ems on this show. I told you guys I was going to be better, and I was. Week 1 was awful in the NFL. Week 2, a lot better. You'll have to tune in for the record that we had last week, as well as college football. We're kind of kicking ass with college football. So we will pick our 4 top games in both the NFL and college and give our thoughts on that as well. So let's just dive right into it. You have at 1 o'clock on Saturday, Drake taking on number 15 South Dakota. South Dakota 1-2, Drake 1-1. South Dakota finally getting their first victory last week. Drake falling on the road to a number 2 South Dakota State team in which they only lost by 16. And before I really dive into what I like about this team, I think we should just talk about the biggest concern first and foremost. Health. What do we know about the quarterback situation? And while I'm close to, Coach Woodley and the program and people in the program, I haven't heard much. It does sound like Logan Inagawa, the true freshman, the third string quarterback, will make his first start for Drake in South Dakota. They do say that Chase Spellman is day-to-day, but they're really hopeful. When they talk about Spellman, you hear this hope in their voice and kind of a positive vibe from people close in the program of just him being able to finish out the season and shouldn't be gone for too much longer. On the other hand, Xavier Washington, you get told day-to-day, but from afar, that looked like a real tough injury. Looked like a lower leg. He needed 2 offensive linemen to help him off the field. So that's kind of the update on the health. We don't know much. Xavier Washington is still day-to-day. Chase Spellman as well day-to-day. So we can only assume that the third string quarterback in Logan Inagawa will be making his first start. And he didn't play bad at all. If you missed any part of Monday or Wednesday's show where we really dived in to the true freshman's performance, go check those out. But Logan played just fine for everything he was dealt with, kind of going in to the season expecting very minimal playing experience or playing time, if any. And then you get thrown into the fire against number 2 South Dakota State on the road while being down. I thought he surpassed expectations for sure. 140 yards in the air, 1 interception, which again, that turnover wasn't awful. It wasn't egregious by any means. It hit the wide receiver in the hands, was just a little high, and it was his only turnover. What he really stood out doing, and what you would expect this team to kind of zero in on offensively against South Dakota, is his ability to use his legs. 75 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown against South Dakota State. This team performed well with the third string true freshman quarterback against the number 2 team in the FCS on the road. 37-21 was the final, when previous seasons Drake is getting boat raced off of the field against the Jackrabbits. I still liked their performance, and I still like the weapons that Logan Inagawa has. The tools he has should set him up to be successful. Should set up Drake to be competitive in these top 15 type games. Starting off with wide receiver and Hank Foley. We talked about his story a little bit on Monday. Just incredible. It was something like only 6 or 7 receptions he had all last season. Now he's leading the team in receptions, in yards, in touchdowns. 3 touchdowns in 2 games for Hank Foley. And back-to-back games where he's been the opening touchdown scorer for the Drake Bulldogs, almost on the same exact play, a little post pattern right down the middle. And Chase Spellman hit him right in the numbers, and then Xavier Washington did the same thing against South Dakota State. Next to Foley in his 3 touchdowns in 2 games, you have Jackson Voth, who is the transfer out of Kansas State. A lot of hype around him, and just one of those playmakers that can make his own plays. You had Foley and Voth as your wideouts for a true freshman quarterback. That's over 300 yards combined they have in just 2 games, and just 2 really reliable targets where you're going to kind of calm those nerves for Logan Inagawa. The rushing side of things, you're seeing glimpses of where this team could be, but it hasn't fully clicked. Going into the season, the second leading rusher from a year ago in Luke Woodson was kind of the projected RB1, but hasn't found a rhythm. And then you go over to Menzinger, who has just completely taken advantage of his opportunities. 86 yards leading the team, but has still yet to either one of them has yet to have that breakout performance. And I still fully believe in these top 15 type atmospheres on the road, Drake is better off slowing these games down and utilizing Menzinger and Luke Woodson and Taj Hughes more often than trying to make it a shootout. You're not going to complain ever with an opening drive touchdown. And if it's as fast as it was against South Dakota State, you're not going to complain. But in previous seasons, that has set up to where Drake just can't compete in a shootout type atmosphere for the full 60 minutes. This team may be different, but I still would like to see Drake kind of lean into the run and try to get Messinger and Luke Woodson kind of rolling and get more fluid blocks up front with the offensive line. While we've talked plenty about the new players that Coach Woodley has added to this Drake offense and defense as well, wanted to talk about the coordinators, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And we talked a little bit about it on Monday and Wednesday, but I think Kyle Kemp has done a tremendous job in week 1 and week 2 for the Drake Bulldogs. I like how they're trying to stay balanced. They're not leaning on one side or the other. 32 rushing plays, 29 passing plays versus South Dakota State. I do expect to see the rushing numbers go up this week, especially when Coach Woodley on Wednesday already talked about how going up against South Dakota State, they were already planning to bring Logan into the game. They were already planning on utilizing his ability to run and create plays with his legs. So I'm going to assume against South Dakota, a top 15 team on the road, you're going to try to slow the game down, and you're going to do that by those design quarterback runs. But overall, really, really impressed so far and pleased with what I've seen from Kyle Kemp as the offensive coordinator. Let's get into the concerns, though. First off, road dogs. This is a tough home atmosphere. South Dakota, 9 straight wins at home. It leads FCS. The defense versus the run, South Dakota hasn't been incredible. They're the 32nd run offense with only 75 yards per game. But they got a dog in LJ Phillips, who recorded an FCS record of 301 yards, 2 touchdowns a week ago. And Drake's defense versus the run struggled against South Dakota State. Allowed over 210 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, and probably the number that you want to see go down the most is just those yards per carry. Almost 5 yards per carry for the Jackrabbits. So the concerns really start with the run, with the guy who will be carrying the ball in LJ Phillips, and then just that's a tough atmosphere to win in. And we'll get into the quarterback situation with South Dakota, because I know some of you are going to be sitting there and saying, so your biggest concern is with the run, when they have one of the quarterbacks who came from Iowa State and is 3rd all-time at South Dakota in passing yards, and yet he's not your biggest concern? He is one of my concerns. But a big key for Drake is I think this offense, or this defense, can get out there and make things difficult for Aiden Bowman. Aiden Bowman, the senior, hasn't had a great senior season to start. Really struck with the turnover bug. 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Drake must cause turnovers. Something they didn't really do against South Dakota State, where they got a few 4th down stops that were huge. But creating turnovers and creating short yardage, short field starting positions for the offense, especially for Logan Inagawa as a true freshman going into this hostile environment. So causing turnovers, and I think Drake has an opportunity to do that against an Aiden Bowman who I don't think they'll lean on as much when they have a guy like LJ Phillips in the backfield, who was the backup running back. Drake's not even facing their starter, who began the season. LJ Phillips was the backup, and he's the one coming off of a record-setting performance. So I think South Dakota is going to continue to just utilize that run. But Aiden Bowman, very much capable of being a strong threat as a quarterback. We saw what he did against Iowa State, where, man, he led a couple of drives that looked flawless. Iowa State, of course, caused some turnovers, and that's how Iowa State, on top of just having a dominant offense, was able to take down South Dakota. Drake may not have that dominant offense, especially when you're going up against a tough team like South Dakota, but you can still make things easier, and that's going for the quarterback, and that's just going for the team as a whole. One of the last things I want to hit on is just the special team issues and the importance of special teams going into this game. When you're playing a top 15 squad on the road, you can't leave points on the board, and that's what Drake did at South Dakota State at the end of the first half, missing a field goal, and then just some issues in the punting game setup. Short field position starts for South Dakota State. Those minor issues are major when playing a top 25 team like South Dakota. Last thing is very similar to South Dakota State. You just don't want to let the history get to you. And it's a little easier when you have a brand new staff, when you have brand new players. It's a little easier, but the numbers are still not pretty for Drake against South Dakota. They weren't pretty against South Dakota State, and they haven't gotten any better this week. 5-0 in the last 5 for South Dakota. They've scored 50 or more points in 3 of the last 4. This is going to be a really tough, hostile environment for Drake. You have promise offensively from what you saw against South Dakota State, but just a lot of concerns going into this game. How will Inagawa perform now as the true starter? How will he perform when you have a defense as good as South Dakota is? And then can the defense help the offense out by causing just a few turnovers? That is the preview for Drake versus South Dakota. South Dakota, number 15 in FCS. Drake 1-1, trying to win this one before they get one more bye week in September. Game kicks off at 1 p.m. You can, of course, listen to it on the radio as well as watch it on ESPN+. But what you should be doing is following at Media Row Pod on Twitter, and that is where you'll be able to get all the full breakdowns. We'll keep you updated on scoring drives. We'll keep you updated on just our full real-time reactions to the game. So if you want full deep dive Drake football, no better place to go than Media Row Pod on Twitter. So here we go. Time for the pick'ems. Favorite part of the show. Absolutely love it. I told you guys I was going to be better last week in our NFL picks because week 1 I was horrendous. Week 2 much better. 3-1. So I'm telling you, improvement. We're not afraid of adversity. We're not afraid of licking our wounds, saying that we sucked a week ago. We're not going to hang our heads down, though. We're going to improve, and that's what we did, and that's what we do here at Media Row. So let's start. Bengals versus Vikings. At Vikings, Minnesota a 2.5-point favorite. It's a backup battlefield. Jake Browning for Cincinnati after the Bengals offensive line gets Joe Burrow hurt once again with turf toe now. He's out a few months. Jake Browning, though, performed well against Jacksonville. 2 touchdowns, 241 yards, 3 interceptions. We'll get to that in a little bit. J.J. McCarthy out after just a really disappointing Monday night game or Sunday night game against Atlanta. And now you bring in Carson Wentz. You guys remember Carson Wentz? Is it weird to me? I feel more confident with Carson Wentz under center for the Vikings than I do J.J. McCarthy. I maybe not to the extreme Sam Darnold took Minnesota a season ago, but very similar. And you get a veteran guy, a guy who's been there, understands the system a little better. I think they'll have good success. But I'm not basing my pick strictly off of the quarterback position. While that is a big reason, I would pick one or the other. It really starts with the defensive side of the ball. Vikings, I think that secondary is going to be tested with Chase, but that defensive line, it caused issues for Caleb Williams. It caused issues for Michael Penix. And it's going to cause issues for Browning because that Cincinnati offensive line has been brutal. Joe Burrow has been sacked second most in the league. First is Russell Wilson, which Seahawk fans like me understand the issues there. But Joe Burrow has not been protected for like the last 3 seasons, it feels like, for Cincinnati. They haven't improved. I think the Vikings defensive line definitely will have its opportunities to cause issues for Jake Browning. That secondary isn't great, but isn't terrible, and I think can cause issues for Browning in terms of turnovers. Biggest concern for the Vikings is just slowing down the run of the Bengals. They gave up 5 yards per carry against Atlanta. I got the Vikings, though. I think the Vikings win at home. I have trust that Carson Wentz is still a good quarterback. I don't think he's as great as he used to be, of course, but I think he's a very valuable second-string quarterback. I think Jake Browning will have his opportunities, but if those turnovers continue to happen, the Vikings defense, especially the defensive front, is going to capitalize on it. Moving on, we have an AFC West matchup between the Broncos and Chargers. Chargers a 2.5-point favorite. Herbert, 560 yards and 5 touchdowns in 2 games. The Chargers offense has been incredible, and I don't think it slows down. Broncos could be without their top safety in Hufanga, a top 10 safety. He's tied for 8th in total tackles this season with 12. I think the Broncos are a good team. I think they have potential. It just is really tough when you're playing in a division that has Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, despite their 0-2 start. But now you have to worry about the Chargers, where Harbaugh has Herbert looking like how we all thought Herbert should have looked 2 years ago. 560 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Chargers offense is rolling. Defense showed great ability to cause issues for quarterbacks with 3 interceptions off of the Raiders' Geno Smith. I don't care if it's a shorter week with them playing on Monday night. I think the Chargers don't steamroll the Broncos, but I think they win comfortably against Denver. I will get the Chargers winning at home. The offense continues to roll, and this Broncos defense really struggles to slow down Herbert and the Chargers. Now moving on to Chicago. Got the Cowboys taking on the Bears. Cowboys 1.5-point favorite on the road. Dallas defense. Man, wouldn't it be crazy? Wouldn't it have been nice if Dallas just had a pass rusher? Someone to, really get in the backfield. Just a dominant force. You could double team them and it wouldn't matter. Like a player like Parsons. If they could have had a player like Parsons, this team would be incredible. I mean, after seeing how the Packers defense has been with Parsons, what was Dallas thinking? We all knew it was a crazy trade, but even now, just looking at the numbers, Dallas defense, worse than rough. 30th in yards per game with 404. 30th in passing yards allowed per game. 23rd in rushing yards per game. And 27th in points per game. Can't get worse than that, right? Well, then Chicago says, hold my beer. Very last in the NFL in points allowed per game. That says enough for me right there. I don't need to do a huge deep dive, but when you have the Bears defense very last in the league, coming off of allowing 52 against Detroit, the Dallas defense may be awful, but the offense is elite. 3rd in yards per game, 7th in passing, 11th in rushing, 5th in points per game. Give me the Cowboys. The 1.5, no. No, I think the Cowboys win by a touchdown, if not more. Give me Dallas on the road against the Bears. Now, finishing up, we have a possible Super Bowl matchup right here. Game of the week. Lions at Ravens. Ravens minus 4.5. Start with Baltimore. Back-to-back 40-plus point performances. Lions had 52 against the Bears. Both teams, I just love the offenses and how they're so balanced. They can beat you on the ground. They can beat you airing it out. They involve the running backs in the passing game for both teams. But I watch the Ravens, and I like the Lions. I like Dan Campbell. But when I watch the Ravens, I sit back and I just kind of shrug my shoulders and go, how do you stop this team? How do you stop this team? I feel like, one, Josh Allen had a Hall of Fame type game comeback in week 1, but I also feel like Baltimore beat themselves in that game. Week 2, they didn't look great defensively, but a little better, but that offense still continued to show out. I just still have so much faith in just the weapons Baltimore has when you could just do a read option for the whole game of Henry and Lamar Jackson. I don't know how you slow down this team. I think they would have to beat themselves for them to lose against the Lions, and I don't see it happening at home. Give me Baltimore. I do like that minus 4.5, though. It will be close. It will be a back-and-forth battle, especially if the defensive issues continue to show up for Baltimore. So just a quick review. We have the Vikings over the Bengals. We have the Chargers over the Broncos. Cowboys, I think, easily over the Bears. And then the Ravens pulling out a primetime victory over the Lions. Went 3-1 last week. Hopefully we can improve and get our first 4-0 this week. Let's go over to our college football picks. And last week, 3-1, another solid week. But damn, we were so close to our first 4-0 on the season. The Fighting Irish blowing that lead gave away our first 4-0 on the year. But still 3-1, very good. 9-3 overall. We're still staying steady, continuing to improve each and every week. This week's tough, though. This week is tough. A lot of coin flip games. Let's start with Iowa at Rutgers, though. Rutgers 3-0 with a quarterback that ranks 3rd in the Big Ten in yards, 5th in touchdowns, and 7th in QBR. Defense on the other end, totally different story. Defense 4th worst in points per game, 3rd worst in rushing yards per game, 14th in passing yards per game. You add on now the injuries that they're announcing at secondary before this game, and there's a lot of issues on that side of the ball. Iowa, we know, isn't a explosive passing team, and that is why I don't think Iowa wins because of the issues at secondary for Rutgers. It's because this is a perfect game for Mark Gronowski. Mark Gronowski is going to be able to utilize his biggest asset for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and that's his legs. The rushing numbers against Rutgers by opposing quarterbacks have been outstanding through 3 games. 198 total yards in rushing by just opposing quarterbacks against Rutgers. Mark Gronowski shines tonight, and this Iowa offense actually moves down the field through the legs of their running backs and mostly Mark Gronowski, and Iowa takes down Rutgers. Moving on to, there's a bunch of games that you could easily call game of the week. But moving on to Texas Tech and Utah, both teams 3-0. Texas Tech adds a bunch of transfers from the portal on the defensive side of the ball, and Utah finally has a quarterback, which has been the issue for like 3 years in Utah. Gut reaction, before really diving into this game, I wanted to pick Texas Tech because of what I saw from them a year ago. Last game I covered at Jack Trice for the radio station was Iowa State's loss at home to Texas Tech. Texas Tech walked in to Ames, Jack Trice Stadium, and made what would then become the runner-up in the Big 12, the Iowa State Cyclones, look brutal. They just marched up and down the field, made it look easy, and they just only improved as the season went on. Then I started thinking about Utah, though. I always trust their defense. How could you not? Utah, one of the most sustainable things with that program in the last 5 years has been the play of the defense. Now you add on a really strong quarterback. This team is undeniably a contender, a threat to not just those in the Big 12, but to those around the country. Last year, Utah, bottom 3 in the Big 12, 4 one-loss games. But they had the number 2 defense in the conference, 14th ranked offense. Devin Dapier, game changer. And that's why Texas Tech wins, because that defense is going to be aggressive. It's going to be physical at home. Give me Dapier being the game changer, and Utah finally having a quarterback and seeing what they can do with someone under center. Moving on, Illinois at Indiana. Indiana 5.5-point favorite, 9 versus 19. Man, 5.5 to 19 Indiana is kind of surprising. At first, the Duke win didn't do a lot for me with Illinois, but it's something. Indiana hasn't played a single power conference team. The last team they played was Indiana State, and they steamrolled them, like had 50 points at halftime. So give me Illinois. Give me the experience not only they've had this season, but the experience they bring back onto the field at quarterback, at vital positions. I think Illinois wins, and I'm shocked the 5.5 is with Indiana. But while it wouldn't be a upset in terms of rankings, it'd be an upset according to Vegas. So give me Illinois with the upset. Moving on to the last game we'll pick for today's show. 21 Michigan at Nebraska. And I'm going to ask you guys to do something. Now, if you're driving, listening to the show, don't do this. But I want you to close your eyes and not picture the uniforms, the logos, blank slate of either team. And I just want you to look at the rosters and the coaches on each side of this, of each side. Nebraska has the advantage. I think Nebraska has the better quarterback. I think Nebraska has the better coach. Michigan's head coach is even going to be there with his suspension. Nebraska's offense is legit. Dylan Raiola, cringy off the field, and even sometimes on the field with his like weird Patrick Mahomes obsession. But a solid quarterback. And this was the team in the preseason I was talking about. Man, when you look at that schedule, outside of like Michigan and maybe one other game, this team easily could be a 1-loss, 2-loss team by the end of the season. So many opportunities offensively for this team. So many weapons. Michigan is still a really strong team. I like the true freshman quarterback, but I'm going to go at Nebraska here with the home upset. I just think when you look at the coaches, the rosters next to each other, if you're, man, it took me a lot to pick Nebraska because when you do look at, that block N, you think of choking away wins. you think of blowing wins. This is a team that I think could change the mindset and the national outlook on Nebraska. And it starts with a huge game against number 21 Michigan. So to recap, we got Iowa over Rutgers. We got Utah over Texas Tech, Illinois over Indiana, and Nebraska with the upset over 21 Michigan. Thank you guys again so much for tuning into today's show. Always a blast. Make sure to follow us all over social media. Go back and listen to any shows that you miss wherever you get your podcast. Media Row will be there. And as always, go check out Stevens Automotive and Sales, 5320 Northwest Beaver Drive in Johnston, Iowa. 35 years of family owned and operated here in the state. I've never trusted anyone more with my car than the people at Stevens Automotive and Sales. Wonderful people, 35 years of family owned and operated here in the state. Go check them out. And when you do, make sure to let them know that Media Row sent you. That will do it for today's show. Monday, full recap of everything over the weekend. Drake versus South Dakota. We'll preview Iowa State for the week. We'll talk about Iowa and Rutgers. And then, of course, the national college football news and NFL news throughout the week as well. Happy that you guys are joining us and continuing to grow this show. Really appreciate you all so much from the bottom of my heart. Continue to support Media Row, and we will see you on Monday.